My name is Eric Matthews, though everyone calls me Vic. I'm 68 years old, a retired construction foreman from Salt Lake City, Utah. And 18 months ago, I became a widower. I thought losing my wife, Helen, would be the hardest thing I'd ever face. But I was wrong. Because what came after her death was something I never imagined, discovering that the woman I shared 45 years with had quietly built a fortune worth $53 million. When Helen passed, the world went silent. The hum of the refrigerator, the clock on the wall. Everything seemed louder because her laughter was gone. I poured us each a whiskey, not the expensive bottle Alec had brought, but my own cheap bourbon that Helen and I used to share on Friday nights. Evan sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd done homework as a kid, and stared into his glass. "The wedding's getting out of control," he said finally. "Alec keeps wanting to upgrade everything. Bigger venue, better food, more guests. I've tried to talk to him about the budget, but he says we shouldn't settle for less than perfect." "What do you think perfect should look like?" I asked. Evan rubbed his face. "I don't know anymore, Dad. I just wanted something small and meaningful." But Alec has all these ideas about image and impression. Image and impression, not love and commitment. I chose my next words carefully. "Son, do you feel like Alec loves you? Or do you feel like he loves the idea of you?" Evan looked up, hurt flashing across his face. "That's not fair, Dad." "I'm not trying to be unfair. I'm trying to be honest. Because from where I'm sitting, I see a man who's more interested in what your life looks like from the outside than what it feels like on the inside." "He's not like that," Evan said, but his voice lacked conviction. "He's just ambitious. He wants us to have a beautiful life together." "Beautiful costs money, Evan. Whose money is he planning to use?" Silence, heavy and uncomfortable. "He keeps hinting that you might help," Evan admitted quietly. "Says that parents usually contribute to weddings, that it's traditional, that you'd probably want to honor Mom by making sure her only son has a memorable wedding. Using Helen's memory as leverage. That was a new low. "Your mother," I said carefully, "would have wanted you to marry someone who loved you for you. Not for what they thought your family could provide." Evan's eyes filled with tears. "Are you saying he doesn't love me?" "I'm saying I don't know yet, and I don't think you do either." He left shortly after, upset but thinking. I watched his taillights disappear down the street and prayed I hadn't pushed too hard. But seeds of doubt, once planted, have a way of growing. That night, I did something I'm not proud of. I called Grace Lambert, Helen's lawyer, and asked her to run a background check on Alex Sinclair. "Are you sure?" she asked. "This could open a can of worms." "I need to know who my daughter is marrying," I said. "And if it turns out he's exactly who he says he is, then I'll apologize and pay for their honeymoon myself." Grace was thorough. She hired a private investigator, a retired FBI agent named Marcus Chen, who specialized in financial fraud. It took him 3 weeks. When he called me to schedule a meeting, his voice was grim. "Mr. Matthews, you're going to want to sit down for this." Marcus spread documents across my dining room table like a prosecutor laying out evidence. "Alex Sinclair," he began, "isn't his real name." My stomach dropped. He was born Alexander Dante Santoro in Denver, Colorado in 1995. Changed his name legally 4 years ago after a series of fraud allegations in Colorado and Arizona. Marcus slid a police report across the table. He was accused of romance fraud twice. Both cases were dropped due to insufficient evidence, but the pattern is clear. Romance fraud? The words hung in the air like poison gas. "Tell me everything," I said. "First case, 2020. He dated a 45-year-old widow in Phoenix for 8 months, got engaged, convinced her to add him to her bank accounts and credit cards for wedding expenses, disappeared with $87,000 3 weeks before the wedding. Second case, 2021. A 38-year-old divorced man in Colorado Springs. Same pattern. Engagement after 4 months. Borrowed money for business investments that never materialized. Victim lost $62,000 before he figured it out and went to the police. Marcus pulled out a photo. A younger Alec, but unmistakably him. Both cases were dropped because the victims had willingly given him access to their money. Hard to prove fraud when the transactions were technically consensual. I felt physically sick. My son was engaged to a con artist, a predator who specialized in exploiting grief and loneliness for profit, and I had almost let it happen. There's more, Marcus said. His current employment, he does work for a pharmaceutical company, but he's been there exactly 7 months, not the 3 years he told your son. Before that, he was unemployed for 11 months, living off credit cards and, I suspect, targeting new victims. The engagement ring? I asked. Financed. $8,200 at 18% interest. He's made exactly 1 payment, already 60 days behind. Marcus looked at me with something close to sympathy. Mr. Matthews, this man researches his targets. He knew your wife had died. He knew your son was grieving. He probably knew he was vulnerable and looking for connection. But he doesn't know about the money, I said quietly. He thinks we're middle class. He thinks there's nothing to take. Yet, Marcus said. But con artists are patient. They build trust first. Then, once they're married, once they have legal standing as family, they start asking bigger questions, digging deeper. What would you do? I asked. If this was your son? Marcus gathered his documents carefully. I'd tell him the truth, all of it. Show him the evidence, and then I'd pray he believes you before it's too late. I called Ava that night and asked her to come over, alone. Is everything okay, Dad? We need to talk. It's important. She arrived 20 minutes later, worry etched across her face. I had Marcus's report laid out on the dining room table. When Eva saw the documents, she froze in the doorway. Dad, what is this? Sit down, sweetheart, please. I told her everything. The name change, the fraud allegations, the pattern of targeting vulnerable people, the debt, the lies about his employment. With each revelation, I watched my daughter's face cycle through disbelief, anger, denial, and finally, devastating comprehension. No, she said when I finished. No, there has to be an explanation. People change their names for lots of reasons. Those fraud cases were dropped. He was probably falsely accused. Eva, you just don't like him. You never gave him a chance. I wanted to like him, I said quietly. God, I wanted to be wrong about him. But look at the evidence, sweetheart. Really look at it. Eva's hands shook as she picked up the police reports. I watched her read, watched the truth sink in, watched her entire world crack apart. The woman in Phoenix, she said, voice barely above a whisper. She was a widow, just like Mom was. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. He knew. He targeted me because Mom died, because I was grieving. I wanted to hold her, to tell her everything would be okay, but I knew nothing I said could ease this particular pain. What do I do? She asked. How do I love him, Dad, or I thought I did. Was any of it real? I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe some of it was. Con artists are good at making you feel exactly what they need you to feel. But the foundation was a lie, Ava. All of it. She stayed at my house that night, slept in her old room, or tried to sleep. I heard her crying through the wall at 2 a.m., and I sat in Helen's study, looking at her photo, wishing desperately that she were here to help me navigate this. The next morning, Eva called Alec and asked him to come over to my house. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady but cold. "About what, babe?" "About who you really are." Alec arrived 30 minutes later. I watched from the kitchen as he walked up the driveway, his usual confidence radiating from every step. He had no idea the trap he was walking into. Eva met him at the door. No hug, no kiss. Just a cold stare and a gesture toward the living room where Marcus's report still sat on the coffee table. "What is this?" Alec asked, picking up the documents. I watched his face as he read, watched the mask slip, just for a moment, just long enough. "Where did you get this?" His voice was controlled, but I heard the edge in it. "Is it true?" Eva asked. "Any of it?" "Ava, this is ridiculous. Someone's trying to sabotage us." "Is it true?" Alex set down the papers carefully. Too carefully. "Those fraud cases were dismissed. I was the victim of vindictive exes who couldn't handle the breakup." "Both of them?" Evan asked. "Two separate people, two separate states, both vindictive exes with the exact same story?" "Yes." "And the name change? Alexander Santoro to Alex Sinclair?" "I wanted a fresh start. There's nothing illegal about that." "And your job? You told me you'd been with the pharmaceutical company for 3 years." "You've been there 7 months. A pause. Longer this time. "I misspoke. I was with a different company before." "You were unemployed," Evan said. "For almost a year, living on credit cards." Alex's jaw tightened. The mask was cracking now, visibly. "Who ran this background check? Your father?" "Of course. He never liked me, never trusted me. This is just his way of destroying our relationship." I stepped out from the kitchen then. Couldn't help myself. "I ran the background check," I said. "Because you started asking about money the first night you walked into my house. Because you disappeared for 20 minutes and went through my bedroom. Because everything about you set off alarm bells." Alec turned to me, and for the first time, I saw his real face. No charm, no smile, just cold calculation and barely restrained rage. "You're a bitter old man," he said, "alone in this pathetic house, jealous that your son found someone who actually cares about him." "If you cared about him," I said quietly, "you wouldn't have lied about everything. You wouldn't have researched his family looking for money. You wouldn't have pushed for an expensive wedding you expected someone else to pay for. You don't know anything about me. I know enough. I know you're a con artist. I know you target grieving people. And I know you picked the wrong family this time." "Get out!" Eva said. Her voice shook, but it was firm. Alec turned to her, desperation replacing rage. "Ava, baby, please. Don't let him poison you against me. I love you. Everything I've done has been for us. Get out!" Alex stared at Eva for a long moment, then at me, and finally, the mask came off completely. "You're making a mistake," he said, voice like ice. "Both of you. You have no idea what you're walking away from." The implicit threat hung in the air. "Is that a threat?" I asked calmly. He smiled. It was the most terrifying smile I'd ever seen. "Take it however you want, but you'll regret this." He walked out, slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Eva collapsed onto the couch the moment he was gone, sobbing like her heart was breaking. Because it was. The weeks that followed were brutal. Alec didn't go quietly. He called, he texted. He showed up at Eva's workplace. Each message was a mix of apologies, threats, and manipulation. "I can't believe you believed those lies," one text read. "You're throwing away the best thing that ever happened to you," said another. Your father is controlling you? Can't you see that? And then, more ominously, you have no idea what you've done. Marcus advised us to document everything. Save every message, record every interaction, build a case in case Alec escalated. Guys like this don't just disappear, he warned. They're parasites. When one host rejects them, they move to another. But sometimes, they get vindictive first. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Alec tried a different approach. He showed up at my house at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday night. Drunk, banging on the door, shouting. I know you're rich. I know about the money. You think you're so smart, hiding it, pretending to be some middle-class nobody? I called the police. Stood in my living room with the lights off, phone pressed to my ear, listening to him rage on my front porch. Helen's company, the properties. I did my research. You're sitting on millions and you let me think you were broke. So he had figured it out. Too late, but he'd figured it out. The police arrived 8 minutes later. Arrested him for drunk and disorderly conduct and trespassing. As they led him away in handcuffs, he shouted one last thing. You stole my future. You owe me. The officer who took my statement was a woman in her 40s named Detective Rodriguez. This isn't the first time we've dealt with Mr. Sinclair, she said. Or Mr. Santoro, or whatever name he's using this week. He's done this before? Here in Salt Lake? Twice that we know of. Both times the victims dropped the charges, said they just wanted him out of their lives. I won't drop the charges, I said. I want a restraining order, for me and for my daughter. She nodded approvingly. Good, because guys like this, they keep doing it until someone stops them. The restraining order was granted 3 days later. Alec was ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from me, from Eva, and from our properties. He left Salt Lake City 2 weeks after that. Marcus tracked him to Phoenix, where he'd already started using a new name and a new backstory. He'll do this again, Marcus said. To someone else. Some other grieving person looking for connection. Can't we stop him? Not without a conviction. And convictions in romance fraud cases are nearly impossible. The best we can do is warn people when we can. Eva struggled. Therapy helped, but healing from that kind of betrayal takes time. I feel so stupid, she said one night over dinner at my house. You're not stupid. You were grieving. You were vulnerable. He exploited that. That's on him, not you. But all those signs, the questions about money, the expensive tastes. How did I not see it? Because you wanted to believe in love, I said. Because after your mother died, you wanted to believe something good could still happen. There's no shame in that, sweetheart. That's called being human. She cried. I held her, and slowly, very slowly, she began to heal. 6 months after the restraining order, I finally told Eva the truth about Helen's money. We were sitting in her old study. I'd finally opened it fully, started going through her things, organizing the business documents. There's something you need to know, I said, about your mother, about what she left behind. I showed her the portfolio Grace had given me, the property deeds, the investment statements, the appraised value of the art collection. $53 million. Eva stared at the documents in complete silence for a full minute. I don't understand, she said finally. We lived in this house, drove that old truck. Mom clipped coupons. She wanted you to have a normal childhood, I explained. She didn't want wealth to define you. Or to attract the wrong kind of people. Like Alec. Like Alec. Eva was quiet for a long time. Then she started laughing. Not happy laughter. The kind that comes when irony is too perfect to bear. He was right there. The money he was searching for. right there the whole time, and he never knew. No, I said. He didn't, and that's exactly how your mother wanted it. Why are you telling me now? She asked. Because you're ready. Because you've proven you can handle it with maturity. And because half of this is yours. It was always meant to be yours. I don't want it, she said immediately. Not right now. Maybe not ever. It feels tainted after Alec. You don't have to decide today, I said. Or tomorrow, or even this year. It'll be here when you're ready. Your mother made sure of that. She picked up Helen's wedding photo from the desk, traced her finger over her mother's face. She was protecting me, even after she died. That's what mothers do. A year has passed now since Alec Sinclair, or whatever his real name is, left our lives. Eva is dating again, carefully, with boundaries, with a healthy skepticism born from hard experience. She still lives in her modest apartment, still drives her 10-year-old Honda. The money sits untouched, managed by Grace and a team of financial advisors, growing quietly in Helen's name. As for me, I still live in our old house, still drive the Ford pickup, still clip coupons on Sunday mornings out of habit. But now I understand why Helen lived the way she did. Wealth is a responsibility, a burden, and sometimes a target. She knew that, lived by that. Protected us with that knowledge. I think about Alec sometimes, wonder who he's scamming now, what name he's using, what story he's telling. But mostly, I think about Helen, about her wisdom, her foresight. She built a fortune in silence, protected it in humility, and left it as a shield for the people she loved. That's the real inheritance she left us. Not the money, but the wisdom to know when wealth should be hidden and when love should be questioned. And in the end, that wisdom saved my daughter's life. Thank you for listening to Eric's story. If you enjoyed this narrative, please consider subscribing for more true stories about family, betrayal, and the hidden lives people lead. Remember, not all that glitters is gold, and sometimes the greatest treasures are the ones no one knows you have. For weeks, I couldn't bring myself to open her office door. She'd spent decades running a construction and property development business called Mountain Ridge Builders. And though I'd always known she was good at what she did, I had no idea just how successful she'd become. The funeral was attended by over 300 people, contractors, city council members, business owners, community leaders. They all spoke of Helen with a reverence that surprised me. She transformed Salt Lake's commercial district, one developer said at the wake. She gave my company its first break, another whispered, tears in his eyes. I stood there nodding, accepting condolences, realizing I'd been married to a legend I'd barely understood. The discovery came 2 months after her funeral, when I met with her lawyer, Grace Lambert. She slid a stack of documents across the mahogany desk, her eyes kind but serious. Helen wanted you to have full control of the estate, she said. She left you the company assets, the investment accounts, and several properties across Utah and Colorado. The total valuation is approximately $53 million. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. I remember gripping the armrests of my chair. That must be a mistake, I whispered. We weren't that kind of people. Grace opened a leather portfolio and began listing assets with clinical precision. Mountain Ridge Builders, valued at $18 million. Commercial properties in downtown Salt Lake, Park City, and Boulder, $22 million combined. Investment portfolios, bonds, and liquid assets, $13 million. Her personal art collection, which she never mentioned to you, apparently, appraised at just over $2 million. I stared at the columns of numbers. Art collection? Helen had bought paintings at estate sales, sure. But $2 million worth? She kept separate storage units. Grace continued gently. One in Murray, one in Provo. The keys are in her safe deposit box. Grace smiled softly. She was humble, Mr. Matthews. But she was also brilliant. I went home that day trembling, not from greed or excitement, but from confusion. I had spent 40 years beside that woman, sharing one old house, one truck, and a life so simple it bordered on plain. We never flaunted anything. Helen always said, "Money's just a tool, Vic. If you wave it around, you'll only draw the wrong kind of attention." Our home was a modest 1960s ranch house in the Avenues neighborhood, 1,800 square feet. The kitchen cabinets were original. The carpet in the living room had been there since 1998. We drove a 2012 Ford pickup with 180,000 miles on it. Helen cut coupons. I mowed our own lawn. We were, by every visible measure, thoroughly middle class. And yet, apparently, we were worth more than most of our neighbors combined. Helen had hidden an empire in plain sight. That night, I sat in her old study, surrounded by the scent of cedar and dust. On the wall hung our wedding photo, me in a rented tux, her in a lace dress she'd sewn herself. She had that same crooked grin I fell in love with the day we met. I looked at her picture and whispered, "Why didn't you tell me?" The study was exactly as she'd left it. A simple oak desk, hand-me-down from her father. Filing cabinets that looked like they belonged in a 1970s government office. A desktop computer from 2015 that whirred like a small airplane when it booted up. Nothing in this room suggested wealth. Nothing suggested power. But the documents Grace had given me told a different story. The answer came in a memory I hadn't thought about in years. It was after our daughter Eva was born. Helen had been working late, the business just starting to grow. I'd complained that she was pushing herself too hard. She'd smiled and said, "I'm building something that will outlive us both. But I don't ever want Eva to feel entitled to it. She needs to earn her life, not inherit it." I remember arguing with her that night. What's the point of working this hard if our daughter can't benefit? She touched my cheek, her calloused hand gentle against my skin. She'll benefit from watching us work hard, from learning values, from knowing that security is earned, not given. Then she'd added something I'd forgotten until that moment in her study. Besides, Vic, wealth attracts the wrong people. It changes how others see you, how they treat you. I want Eva to be loved for who she is, not what she might inherit. Promise me you'll never tell her. Not until she's truly ready. I'd promised. And then, over the decades, I'd simply forgotten we'd even had that conversation. Now, sitting in her study with documents worth $53 million spread before me, that promise roared back with devastating clarity. So when Grace asked if I wanted to inform my daughter about the inheritance, I shook my head. "Not yet," I said. "Let her keep seeing me as just Dad. The rest can wait." I didn't realize it then, but that decision, keeping silent about Helen's fortune, would soon protect far more than money. It would protect my daughter's life, her future, and everything her mother worked for. And as I locked Helen's study that night, the echo of her words followed me down the hall. Never let wealth decide who you trust. If only I had known how soon I'd be forced to live by that advice. 6 months after Helen's passing, my daughter Eva began to smile again. For a while, it felt like spring had come back into our lives, until she told me she'd met someone. His name was Alex Sinclair, 29, a pharmaceutical sales representative, originally from Denver. "He's different, Dad," Eva said, her eyes bright with the same light her mother used to have when talking about a new project. "Smart, ambitious, caring. He makes me feel alive again." Eva was 32 years old, a graphic designer working for a small marketing firm downtown. She'd been single for almost 2 years before meeting Alec, focusing on her career and helping me through Helen's illness. After her mother died, she'd retreated into herself, stopped going out, stopped dating. So when she called me that Saturday morning, voice bubbling with excitement, part of me was simply relieved to hear joy in her voice again. "I met him at a conference in Park City," Eva explained. "He was giving a presentation on pharmaceutical innovations. Afterwards, we got coffee, started talking, and, Dad, it just clicked." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I said, meaning it. "You'll like him, I promise. He's successful, well-traveled, sophisticated. He wants to meet you this weekend. Are you free Saturday?" Something in the word sophisticated gave me pause. Helen and I had raised Eva to value substance over style. But grief changes people, and loneliness makes us see what we want to see. "Saturday works," I told her. "Bring him by for dinner." The first time I met Alec, he swept into my living room like he owned the air around him. Short, dark hair, diamond cufflinks that caught the light, and a smile that felt a touch too rehearsed. He carried a bottle of imported whiskey and called me Mr. Matthews, even after I told him twice to call me Vic. "Mr. Matthews, this is a lovely home," he said, setting the whiskey on my coffee table. The bottle was expensive. I recognized the label from a liquor store window downtown, where they kept the $300 bottles behind locked glass. "Thank you," I said. "It's been in the family a long time." "I can tell. There's history here. Character." "Your home is so quaint," he added, his eyes scanning the walls, the shelves, the framed photographs. His tone was smooth, but his gaze wasn't admiring. It was assessing, measuring. I watched him catalog everything: the decades-old furniture, the worn carpet, the outdated kitchen visible through the doorway. I could see his mental calculator working, adding up what he thought my life was worth. And based on what he saw, I knew he was thinking, not much. Good. That's exactly what Helen would have wanted. During dinner, pot roast I'd made in my old crock pot, Alex steered the conversation toward Helen with practiced casualness. "Evan tells me you were married for 45 years. That's remarkable in this day and age." "She was remarkable," I said simply. "What did she do? Professionally, I mean." "So, your wife owned what exactly? A construction company, right?" he asked, pouring himself a glass of the whiskey he'd brought. "Yes," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Mountain Ridge Builders. She ran it for 40 years before retiring." "Must have been quite profitable," he said lightly, his smile fixed. Evan laughed, oblivious. "Dad's always modest about it. Mom was hardworking, but we weren't rich." I forced a small smile. My heart beat steady, but slow. He was fishing, and he didn't even bother to hide the hook. "Construction in Utah must have had its ups and downs," Alec continued. "The real estate market, the Olympics back in 2002, the recession. She must have been very skilled to keep a business running through all that." "She was," I said. "Helen was smart with money. Conservative. She didn't take unnecessary risks." "Did she leave the business to you? Or sell it before she passed?" There it was, the real question hiding behind all the others. I took a sip of water, let the silence stretch. "The business is handled," I said finally. Everything's taken care of. It wasn't an answer, and Alec knew it. But Evan jumped in, changing the subject to a project at work, and the moment passed. For now. Later that night, after dinner, Alec excused himself to use the restroom. He was gone for almost 20 minutes. When he returned, his cologne seemed stronger. Sorry, he said smoothly. I had to take a call, work emergency. But his phone had been sitting on the coffee table the entire time. After they left, I walked upstairs to close the bedroom window and found my door slightly open. I always keep it shut. I stood there for a moment, the house silent, and a chill slid down my spine. Nothing seemed disturbed, but the air felt wrong. I checked Helen's study. The door was still locked. I'd kept it that way since her death. My bedroom looked untouched. Nothing missing from the dresser, but something felt violated. Like invisible fingerprints had been left on my privacy. I opened my closet and checked the shoebox on the top shelf where I kept Helen's wedding ring and a few other pieces of her jewelry. Everything was there, but the box was facing the wrong direction. I always kept the lid facing left. Now it faced right. That night, as I washed the dishes, Helen's voice echoed in my memory. The wrong smile can cost you everything. Over the next few weeks, Alec began to insert himself deeper into our lives. He called me frequently under the guise of getting closer before the holidays. Yet every conversation somehow circled back to the same topic: money, investments, property. One afternoon, he laughed and said, "You must feel so secure after Helen's passing. Not many widowers can afford to stay in their homes comfortably these days." I set down my coffee mug and met his gaze. Security isn't measured by what's in the bank, Alec. It's measured by who you can trust. His smile froze for just a heartbeat before he changed the subject. But the questions kept coming, wrapped in concern and friendship. Have you thought about what you'll do with Helen's business? Are you managing okay financially? Healthcare costs for seniors can be brutal. Eva mentioned you still drive that old truck. You should treat yourself. You've earned it after all those years of hard work. Each question was a probe, each comment a test. He was building a profile of my financial situation, piece by piece, conversation by conversation, and I let him think he was succeeding. That night, I called my old friend Marjorie, who'd known Helen and me for over 40 years. Something about that man unsettles me, I confessed. Marjorie didn't hesitate. Vic, you've always had a good gut. If he's asking about money this early, it's not love he's chasing. It's a lifestyle. Keep your fortune to yourself. Marjorie was a retired family therapist. She'd seen every flavor of human behavior in her 40 years of practice. Tell me about him, she said. Everything. So I did. The expensive whiskey, the too perfect smile, the questions about Helen's business, the 20 minutes alone in my house, the jewelry box that had been moved. Marjorie was quiet for a long moment after I finished. Vic, I'm going to tell you something I learned in 40 years of therapy. When someone shows you who they are in the first few weeks, they're not warming up to you. They're testing boundaries. This man is testing yours, and Evan's, and he's doing it while Evan is still vulnerable from grief. What should I do? I asked. Document everything, every question, every odd behavior, and whatever you do, don't let him know about Helen's money. If he's what I think he is, a financial predator, the moment he knows there's real wealth involved, he'll move fast. They always do. I promised I would. But deep down, a quiet dread had already taken root. Because something told me Alex Sinclair wasn't the kind of storm that passes. He was the kind that waited, smiling, until the moment he could strike. 3 months after that first uneasy dinner, my daughter stood in my kitchen, grinning like a girl again. "Dad," she said, holding out her hand for me to see. "We're engaged." The diamond on her finger caught the light like a blade. It took every ounce of composure I had to smile. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. When did this happen?" "Last night," Alec answered for her. "I proposed after our weekend in Moab. It was perfect. The red rocks, the sunset, it just felt meant to be." Meant to be. Those words should have sounded romantic. Instead, they sounded calculated. The ring on Eva's finger was platinum, embedded with diamonds in a delicate setting. I knew enough about jewelry from Helen's collection to recognize quality when I saw it. That ring cost at least $12,000. Alec worked in pharmaceutical sales, sure, but Eva had mentioned he'd only been with his current company for 6 months. Where did a 29-year-old with a 6-month tenure get $12,000 for an engagement ring? "We're thinking a small ceremony," Eva said, practically vibrating with happiness. "Maybe next spring. Something intimate, just close family and friends." "Whatever makes you happy, sweetheart," I said. Alec wrapped an arm around Eva's waist, his smile bright and perfect. "I'm the luckiest man alive," he said, looking at Eva with what seemed like genuine affection. And maybe it was genuine. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe Helen's warnings had made me see threats where there were none. But then Alec's eyes shifted to me, just for a second. And in that brief glance, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. Triumph. Not love, not joy. Triumph. Like a chess player who'd just positioned his queen. Over the next few weeks, wedding planning consumed Evan's life. They looked at venues, met with caterers, discussed flower arrangements and color schemes and invitation fonts, and slowly, carefully, Alec began suggesting bigger plans. "We should have the reception at Red Butte Garden," he said one evening when they came over for dinner. "That place is expensive," Eva said, frowning. "We talked about keeping costs down. It's our wedding, babe. It should be special. Besides, I'm sure your dad would want to help out." "Right, Mr. Matthews?" There it was again, that assumption of access to my wallet. "Helen and I always believed people should pay for their own weddings," I said carefully. "It makes the day more meaningful when you've worked for it." Alec's smile tightened. Just slightly. Just enough. "Of course, traditional values, I respect that." But the suggestions kept coming. A $5,000 photographer, a $3,000 videographer, a honeymoon in Santorini that would cost close to $12,000. Each time, Eva protested. Each time, Alec found a way to justify it. "We only get married once," he'd say. "We should do it right." And each time, his eyes would drift to me, gauging my reaction, waiting for me to offer, expecting me to offer. I never did. 4 months into the engagement, Evan came to my house alone. It was a Tuesday evening. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. "Dad, can we talk?" "Of course. Coffee?" "Something stronger,"